Hey guys, my name's Olibeau and today we're going to be looking at how to read ESO logs from a healer's perspective. So that's going to include things like checking our raw healing, checking our buff up times, also resource management and our cast per minute. So let's get started. So I've got an anonymous log here. It's from Late Night Dungeoneers, but I've made it anonymous, and I'll link it in the video description as well, so you can follow along at home and make sure you're getting the same numbers as I'm getting, so you know you're doing it right. Okay, so the first thing we're going to look at is to check our raw healing. I would say usually you want to aim for about 60k healing. So let's have a look. I usually turn on raw healing and turn off the absorbs, because we don't want stuff like barriers and shields to count towards it. So there we go. Player 2 here, 61k heals per second, which is great. As I say, over 60k, that's what we're aiming for. Now player 12, 36k. Now why could this be? So we know this is Lookestis, so this is going to mean that this is probably our cage healer, because they're only focusing their healing on one player for most of the fight, that is going to be lower. So we can account for that, and that's fine. So let's check the other fights. Yolnakrin, there we go, 67k and a 60k. Here we go. Player 12 is pretty high now, so we can assume that there's probably not a problem with their healing. 60k, that's great as well. And last one, Navintus. Let's have a look. 58 and 55. Again, it's close to 60k, but it's not quite 60k. So why might that be? So what we know in the Navintus fight is there is a lot of sort of role playing and just hanging around when the boss is flying. So yeah, we see there's some significant dips here, and that's probably going to be at the same time when we're just hiding behind statues. And also we've got 3 less players because they're downstairs. So that's going to totally account for that. Yeah, so as I say, try and aim for about 60k in a full healing fight where you're not role playing or anything. Around 60k, that's pretty good. And that goes for all trials, to be honest. Some you're going to get more, like Kyne's Aegis on the last boss hard mode, you might get more because there's a lot going on. But yeah, 60k, that's a healthy number to look for. Resource management. So obviously when we're healing, we don't want to run out of magicka. So let's have a look. We want go to resources, click on this tab here for health, and we go down to magicka. And who were our healers? Our healers were player 2, and there you go, almost always above 75%, which is awesome. Let's check the other bosses. He dipped quite low there, 25, but we're never running out, so that's fine. Lookestis, getting a bit shaky around here, but again we're not running out apparently, so that's pretty good. Player 12, yeah, very high again. Yolnakrin, yeah, it's great. Navintus. Okay, so this drop here that's going to mean that they died if it drops 0 immediately. So we can, yeah, that's what that is. What I would suggest is if you do have high resources and you're staying above, if you're staying close to 100 the whole time, I'd recommend you can check your jewelry enchants. So we've got 3 magicka regens here, so maybe this player could afford to go with 1 or 2 spell damage instead, just to there's nothing wrong with their healing output, but we could afford to go with more spell damage if we want to. It's up to you, but you might notice it might not be something that you pay attention to in fight. your sustain, but then when you review it afterwards you might think, oh well, I can afford to get rid of some of my recovery and go for spell damage. Cast per minute as well. That is, I mean, it's not always going to be something that is completely relevant. I mean, this is fine. You usually find yourself between the DDs and the tanks, which is a good place to be. But if you see that you're like right down at the bottom here, or you've got an activity of like less than, I don't know, less than 90%, that'd be something to worry about, and you need to sort of see whether you're just running around doing nothing or whether you're actually casting skills. There you go. So these ones are at 43, but that's going to be because they're in the portal. And these, let's have a look, tanks at 97 and 93. Again, this Noventus has got a bit of role-playing and just standing around doing nothing. So as long as you're like not too far away from the DDs, you're probably doing a pretty healthy amount of cast per minute. I'd say like in a full fight you could probably aim for about 90. Let's see, these two players are 84 and 83. I mean, yeah, 80, 90, anywhere around that. That's usually healthy enough. Okay, so one of our other main jobs as a healer is going to be our buff up times. Now, one of the most important ones that we provide is Minor Berserk, so combat prayer. So let's do Control F, type in Minor Berserk, and let's have a look. Okay, and we want to make sure we've got the active ability, because the passive ability, that's going to be something like Slime Craw or the Warden Wing things. So I think if we look at Lachesis, we have, let it load, Minor Berserk, active, have we got a passive somewhere? Passive ability, there we go, passive ability. That's not going to be us. You see there's only one instance of it as well, so that means it's constant the whole time. But Minor Berserk is something we can track, so let's click on that. There you go, player 2, that's our healer. Player 12 is our healer as well. So, yeah, pretty good. Quite consistent. Like, I mean, who's missing out? So that's player 9. So maybe it could be that they're not standing in the right place. Maybe they're standing too far left or right or behind the healer. So if you know who your player 9 is, let's see, it's a Nightblade. You know, maybe just try and pay attention to that a little bit more, or ask them to stand in the right place if you don't think they're stood in the right place. Also, we can have a look at our specific ones as well from each player. So player 2, so they're hitting most players, but again, player 9, they're not hitting quite as much. They're hitting the, I think this is the off tank here. So they're hitting the off tank sometimes. Player 11, yeah. It's not bad. Let's see, player 12. Yeah, so these phases in between, that's probably going to be when they're healing cages or something like that. Let's see, when they're doing combat prayer, they are hitting quite a few people. Maybe not everyone, but hitting enough people. Magicka Steel as well. So if you want to look at stuff like debuffs, we're going to go to debuffs here. Not Minor Berserk. Debuffs on the enemies. All enemies, we want Lachesis, and we want our Minor Magicka Steel. So this Minor Magicka Steel is coming from our Templar. That's going to be our Radiant Aura. So let's try something a little bit more predictable, where we're actually using Elemental Drain. Yolnacrin, Elemental Drain, let's have a look. So Minor Magicka Steel again, that's going to be from the Templar healer. Okay, so we want to check it on Yolnacrin. So what we can do is, once we've found, we've gone to debuffs, we can go to enemies, we can go to Yolnacrin. So we're just seeing our Magicka Steel on Yolnacrin. And now we see there's a few gaps here, but what we can do, so we can use this graph and overlay it onto a different graph. So we click this little button here. There we go, so we've got that graph saved, and now what we can do is we can look at our damage done to damage done to friendlies. Damage done by friendlies, sorry, to Yolnacrin. And you can see these are going to be the dips here. That's going to be the phases when the boss is flying. So what we can do then is, instead of having graph separate up here, we can click on this until it goes to main. There we go. So our Magicka Steel, there we go, lines up with when the boss is flying. So there's a tiny little gap here, maybe a slight gap at the beginning here, but oops. Yeah, the Magicka Steel is great, so we're on target for that. Major Force uptime. So now this is something that you want to be organising with your fellow support team. Nowadays on ESOLogs we've got our Major Force like up here at the top. So let's go again, Major Force, click on this. We can get rid of this old graph. So let's see. So we've got gaps in there again. So let's click on this so we can add it to there. Go back to our damage done to Yolnacrin. And we overlay it over the top. So again, we've got a few gaps here. This one we've got 4 horns. This one probably 3, maybe 2 or 3 here. Ideally on Yolnacrin we could probably fit 4 in each time. So if you want to improve your Major Force uptime, I definitely recommend assigning a player to call out the horns. Ideally tanks are usually in a pretty good position to do it, healers as well, it's not a bad position. DDs it's quite difficult because they're not usually looking at the horn timer, they're just looking at, you know, what they're focusing on. But the main thing is that you're comfortable with the encounter before you start calling out horns, because it is going to be sort of you do have to focus a little bit on it. So let's see, we've got 1 extra long horn here, so these are going to be our Yorvald horns, I assume. I think we have, let's see, our player 2, they are wearing, yeah, Yorvald and Roaring Opportunist, great. So yeah, I mean, maybe phases 2, 3 and 4 we could have done a better horn uptime. You know, just talk to the rest of your support team and see why that is, because it could be, I know when I'm off tanking for example, I struggle to get close enough to the group to pop a horn on Yolnacrin if I'm going like later than second. So the off tank in this fight, you probably want them to do a horn first or second. So if they don't have their horn ready for like the first bit, they're going to be off for the rest of it. So that could have been what happened. Who knows? You'll just have to talk to your players. Class specific buffs as well. So depending on what kind of healer we've got, we're going to be looking at different class specific buffs. So we do have a Templar healer here. So let's get rid of this other graph. And we want a buff. So what's Templar buff? What Warden buffs can we look at that's going to be quite normal to have? Let's have a look at their skills. Expansive Frost Cloak. Let's have a look at how our Expansive Frost Cloak is. So we go to buffs. We can go to buffs provided by player 12. Just to narrow things down a bit. There'll be defensive buffs. Minor toughness, minor resolve. That's probably going to be it, isn't it? There we go. So we can pop that as an overlay. Then we look at our damage done to Yolnacrin again. Yeah, there you go. Our Ice Cloak is up for all the time that the boss is up as well. So awesome, perfect. So Templars, what are they looking for? I mean, you're probably not looking for Power of the Light anymore, especially with the new Alkosh. But a Sork's probably looking at their Minor Prophecy if they're the only Sork. We can also check things like Line Breaker, so our Alkosh debuff. That's going to be a very important one to look at. So let's see. Alkosh is a debuff. So we want to go to debuffs on the enemies. It's called Line Breaker. There we go. Boom. 48%, but again we don't know whether that's when the boss is actually alive, so damage done, friendlies to Yonakrin. We're missing a little bit here, we're missing a little bit here. Now maybe as healers we can do something about that, and we can provide some synergies. So let's have a look. Who is our Alkosh tank? I believe it's player 5. So we can go to player 5 here. Let's get rid of all these things here. Casts by player 5. And then let's turn off swap weapons. And what we can look for is our... Right, first we have to go to... We want our Alkosh as a graph, don't we? All abilities, line breaker. We want to save this graph. And then we go to casts, friendly casts by player 5. We want to look for all of these here that are synergies. So blessed shards, that's a synergy. There we go, we can put this on the main graph. Blessed shards is a synergy. Blood Feast and Blood Funnel, those are synergies. Combustion, is that synergy? Yep, Combustion is the magical orbs. Grave Robber, that's a Boneyard. Harvest, that's a Templar, Warden one. Let's see, we're missing one here. What will that be? Purify, probably. There we go. So this is going to be all our synergies. Now, ones which we're responsible for. Combustion, that's going to be the DDs mostly. Blessed Shards, that's going to be the Templar. So let's see, you only got one shard here. Harvest, that's another one we're responsible for. And again, he only got one, so ideally we could have done with a few more harvests and shards maybe. Now, that could be that it's not our fault that he's not getting them. It could be that the harvest is being stolen by other players. So then what we can do is we go down here, let's have a look, harvest, click on that, and then we get rid of this bit, so we're looking at all the friendlies. Aha! Player 1 and player 9. Boom. They are stealing all of the harvests. So you're going to want to go and talk to player 1 and player 9 and tell them to stop stealing the harvest synergy. And let's see, what was the other one? We wanted Blessed Shards, was it? Okay, that one's not being stolen quite so much. And maybe we didn't put many shards down. So it could be that we could put some more shards down, especially in the second half of the fight, maybe, just to buff the Alkosh uptime a bit. Okay, now what else are we going to look for? Roaring Opportunists, that's a very important one now. Let's have a look, let's get rid of our Alkosh. Let's look at our Roaring Opportunist on Lycestis for a change. So buff, it's going to be Major Slayer. So let's add that as an overlay. I want it on... do I want this? No, I don't want this. Let's add our Major Slayer. Okay, interesting. So we're not all getting it at the same time, obviously. Let's have a look at the highest one, which will be on player 8. Let's add that as an overlay, and then check when it's actually happening. Okay, so it does seem to be that we're getting it on the boss a lot, sometimes getting it on the ad phases. So let's have a think, when during Lycestis fight aren't we proccing Roaring Opportunists? So we don't need to proc it during the beam phase because we're not really attacking anything. So the beam phase is going to be like these flat bits here. But maybe during these bits we could have we could have procced it. But of course there's not downtime as well. And it could be that we're procking it on someone else here. Yeah, I mean, this is fine. We're doing the right thing, so at least we've checked it. Let me think. Zen, martial knowledge, you kind of have them on DDs nowadays. But yeah, again, you just look at your debuffs. So I mean, let's see if we've even got anyone wearing Zen. It's probably on a Magicka DK, isn't it? DK with Zen, yeah, debuffs. Debuffs on the enemy from player 10. Touch of Zen, 67%. But then we want to look at the other debuffs that are actually proccing our Zen. So let's see, like at this moment here, we've got engulfing, that's 1, 2, we don't have a bug trap. We've got burning, so that's 1, 2, that's like 3% here. Major defile. Does that count? Who knows? I'll put a link to a article which explains all the Zen debuffs and which ones count towards Zen. Martial knowledge. Let's have a look who's wearing martial knowledge. Friendly is martial knowledge. I think it was a Nightblade. Other sorrow, no. Player 7. Yeah, here we go. So debuffs. Debuffs on Locestis by player, what was it, player 9? No, player 7. Way of martial knowledge. Boom, let's get that. Martial knowledge as a main graph on Locestis. There we go, not too bad. Maybe there we could have fit one in, there we could have fit one in, but it's pretty good. Yeah, so I think that rounds it up, to be honest. Hopefully that's going to be all the tools you need to review your performance as a healer and make any necessary changes to, I don't know, gear, skills, whatever you need. So I'm going to be releasing more videos like this, one for tanks and one for DDs. They're going to focus more on things that are relevant to them. So yeah, thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye bye. Mwah.